something like 50% of the time when a new system is implemented, people want the old system back. We spend millions, billions on technology. It's going to fuel the whole enterprise. And a lot of the time what it does is actually not help people and or drive them crazy.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Schuster. Food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. I'm your host, Dr. Richard. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, and whatever you do, this is the show that is going to help you become the best version of yourself. Each episode, you will hear from some of the most amazing, talented, and successful people on the planet who followed their passions and strive to help others. Join our movement to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others. Together, we're going to make the world a better place. Are you ready? Because it's time for your Daily Helping. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Daily Helping Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard, and our guest today is awesome. Her name is Melissa Swift, and she is an innovative organizational consultant. She's the author of Work Here Now, Think Like a Human and Build a Powerhouse Workplace. This book is available everywhere, and we're going to dive into it. But she has worked with leadership at really large organizations, Mercer, Deloitte, countless others. She's developed novel and market-leading analytical techniques to better understand and address the human side of organizations. She's led large-scale people transformations across work industries, ranging from life sciences to aerospace to professional services. And Work Here Now explores topics such as 3 kinds of broken work, the work anxiety monster, that one's interesting, and couples counseling for humans and technology. This book has been recognized as a groundbreaking resource by Thinkers 50, Porchlight Books, and McKinsey's annual book recommendations. We got a lot to talk about, Melissa. Welcome to the Daily Helping. It is awesome to have you with us today.
I'm excited to be here. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
I can assure you it will be a fun conversation or your money back. But in all seriousness, I talk to people like you all the time, and I'm always so curious. Why do you do what you do? I want to jump in the Melissa Swift time machine, and let's go back. Talk to us about your superhero origin story. What put you on the path you're on today? And let's start there.
In some ways, it's, you can, what they say, retcon it, right? Retroactive continuity. And you could make it sound really smooth and linear. But I think the reality, like a lot of people's careers, is I've gravitated toward this type of work, right? Of really thinking about people and organizations and how we can do it all better for a long time. I mean, I was offered an internship in people consulting in business school, and I turned it down because the other internship I got offered was in London. So, London, right? Went off to London. But about around the time actually that my daughter was born, I was working in sustainability consulting. And the organization I was working for at that time sort of exited that business, and I'm pondering my career, and I have this new baby, and I'm thinking a lot about, in sustainability, we're trying to do this big picture transformation of organizations. And the sticking point, honestly, is it's people. It's the people side of things. And I really reflected a lot back on my own career and said, I think, that internship I turned down way back when, I think that might have been the right, little branch. I just didn't follow that branch. And that's kind of what got me into this trajectory. I got a job running a think tank for one of the search firms. So really, sifting through all this people data and what story can we tell with it and what learnings can we derive. And then I was off to the races toward this mission of today. What I do all day, every day is, really help organizations think through how we can all do this work thing better.
And I like that you described it as a mission. Right? Like your mission. You get up every day and it's what drives you. And I love that. So you've been doing this for a very long time. You've been doing this at a very high level and with some of the world's largest organizations. So talk to us about this book, Work Here Now. Why did you write the book and why is it so important?
It's interesting, again, kind of back to like the personal triggers. Work Here Now was originally envisioned as a very different book. It was going to be this sort of Land of Oz style journey through all these kooky things in the workplace, right? It was going to be sort of silly and funny. And then COVID hit. And it really, COVID, as it did for so many people, it made me think so much more about my own relationship to work, how we were doing work. It kind of, we're all in a bit of, I sometimes call it, if you know what highway hypnosis is, where you're just driving down and you can actually go into a
You
trance
zone out,
because
yeah.
of the curves. So we were all zoned out before COVID. And then COVID like made us think about how we work. And, I'm trying to do all this. I'm trying to teach my kid virtual kindergarten during the same time. I'm just crazy stuff. And that was kind of the genesis of Work Here Now is, okay, can we really look at this a bit analytically and say, okay, it's not just that work feels kind of weird. There's some legit strange stuff going on. And then what do we do about it?
So as you pivoted, as so many of us did, and what was interesting to me observationally during COVID is a lot of things that I felt were buzzwords became real, right? Like we really, for the first time, I think, in the corporate space, actually started caring about employee mental health. We always said, oh, mental health, burnout, but nobody really cared until COVID. And that's the truth. Yet concurrently, something else happened with COVID where, and yes, there's cell phones and laptops, but generally speaking, for most of us, we would clock out or go home at the end of the workday. And that was it. And so with COVID, there was no guidebook as to if I got an email from my superior at 10:48 p.m. at night, what am I supposed to do? He's working at 10:48. Should I respond to that email? If I don't respond to the email, am I going to get in trouble? So we had an emphasis on some things that needed to change. Yet we added more pressure and stress to ourselves because we never had clearly defined boundaries. And, this is just a commentary on society in general, but there became a much more societal shift, in my opinion, from a psychological standpoint, to an external locus of control, and that things are happening to me that I have no control over. And so people felt helpless. So to me, it was really this soup of all of these things thrown together that forever changed the way that we have to look at work. We have to look at productivity. We have to look at employee well-being. And I don't know that we've ever really fixed all of the issues, but I'm so grateful for you that you said, okay, we have to look at things because if we don't, we're just never going to be productive and satisfied in what we're doing.
It's interesting. I think you make a fabulous point there that it's not just that we're living in sort of anxious workplaces, right? Like that's where the idea of the work anxiety monster came from. It's the little voice in your head, to your point about either you're thinking people around you are slow and lazy or thinking that you yourself are slow and lazy, right? Like if I don't respond to that email immediately, am I a bad employee? But we live in an anxious age and we live with a lot of mechanisms that are designed to make us anxious. So at work, it's, all the Slack messages and Teams messages and emails popping up. We had our phones and there's how many notifications. I don't want notifications from my local, coffee place, but I'm getting them, and you're constantly kind of shutting down all these external stimuli that are just making you more and more and more anxious. And that's not actually a good way to work. It doesn't promote mental health, so it doesn't promote productivity. There's, I think, a huge myth of the workplace that you can sort of hook people and make them nervous into high performance. And it's just not how high performance works.
It's not how high performance works. And, you can get away with it for a little while, but in the end, you burn out your people and the productivity just drops off a cliff and people will leave, right? So
absolutely,
these concepts that we've heard over the last few years, like quiet quitting is one, that never existed. But why do people feel that they need to just throw in the towel and just check out? It's because these other issues are in place. So I definitely do want to talk about, the anxiety monster. That's fun. But let's take kind of a higher level book. So if somebody picks up Work Here Now, what are the things they're going to glean from it? And then let's take a deeper dive, Melissa.
In Work Here Now, what you're going to get are a lot of, I think, some useful frameworks for thinking about how work, is not working, right? So the three types of broken work, performative, misunderstood, intensified. But you'll also get some really concrete strategies. There are 90 strategies in the book, 45 that you can use at sort of organizational level and 45 that you can use at team level to really address the sort of things that have gone wrong with work. Because that's, in professional practice, that's the question you get from your clients, right? It's all nice to do great to do the discovery phase, right? And we all learn a lot from, really data-driven explorations of some of these things, because that's what data is, what takes it out of the realm of like, oh, this just doesn't feel good, to look, here are the activities and the economic bad impact, right, of the way you're managing your employees. But at the end of the day, what we want is we want to know what to do, and we want to know how to actually have an impact. And that's Work Here Now. That's the point of kind of the strategies is, and it doesn't have to be these incredibly elevated things. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the strategies is have a conversation with your team about the pace of work. So there's all this sort of rhetoric about the VUCA and everything's fast paced and crazy. Well, does everything have to be done at top speed? What needs to be done fast and what needs to be done more slowly? That's a super productive conversation. And again, that gets you out of kind of that burnout place when everything's urgent all the time, right? That is the off ramp to burnout. So having that conversation about pace and saying, okay, these are the things that are genuinely urgent, and here's all the stuff that's not. And actually, here's the stuff that would benefit from a more contemplative, meditative approach. Please do these things slow. And when's the last time you ever heard that from your boss? Like, do this stuff slower. It's a good message. And so those are the kinds of strategies you get from the book.
George Lucas is famous for having said faster, more intense, like that was his thing. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody position this quite the way you have, Melissa. I've never thought about pace of work because everybody just thinks about workplace productivity and how do we get to the end point as efficiently as possible. But I don't believe that anyone's ever expressed, oh, well, some things, yeah, like some things you need to strap a rocket to your back. Other things we can take a more measured pace. And it's so obvious. Like, I don't know why, you're like the first person to bring this to the world's attention, but it's like, yeah, like what if we were to go through our items? Because a lot of people will prioritize, right? Oh, this is mission critical. This needs to be an actionable thing right away. But we never then go through again after we've prioritized and say, okay, what can I really take my time with? Do I need to collaborate with half a dozen people or should I do it myself? Like, you're talking about things that, are very different. And this is really cool.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I basically at some point, and I couldn't even tell you exactly when, I got obsessed with kind of the day-to-day basics of work and really started to think about them as something that we don't attend to enough. So things like pace, to your point about collaboration. What is the right number of people to be involved in any given task? We over collaborate with really good intentions. We're like, we need to be inclusive. So we include everyone, but including everybody is actually at a certain point less space for individual voices. So it becomes an uninclusive practice done with really good inclusive intentions, right? In a smaller group, there's more space. There's more, you can use time differently, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's kind of like, what are these everyday work levers? Change the pace, change the number of people involved, the basic basics that, to your point, once you say them, you're like, of course. But we've gotten used to talking about work up here all the time, and down here is where it gets solved.
So these things feel good to talk about, but we're also talking about them kind of at a high level, right? When it gets down to the nitty-gritty of getting people to implement these things in a more micro level, right? Smaller teams doing things yourself. Based on your research, what does that look like? What does that process look like? How quick are people to embrace or, fight back against this? What does your data show?
part of where you're going to have success is actually positioning it against real business change, because a lot of what my work shows is that, there will be sort of an attempt to make some big business change, right? Like a pivot in what market you're going after, you're implementing a new technology, or, whatever the current AI gold rush being a fantastic example. And then there's not this attention to kind of the day-to-day prosaic ways of working around it. And then conversely, sometimes organizations will go after the day-to-day prosaic ways of working, and people are like, that's fine, but I got like this big AI thing going on, right? I have 20 other, things going on. So where you actually get success in changing these like real building blocks of work is you make space for it, right? You don't have 20 million other things going on, but you also line it up to the things that are genuinely important to the business. If you say, okay, well, if this meeting continues to be a 30-person meeting, we are never going to make progress against this business objective that we identified in this year's strategy process as important, right? This meeting needs to be like, I'm making this up, 2 5-person meetings, each with a different, purpose, right? And that's how we're going to actually march through to getting this thing done that we all want to get done. That's the sweet spot, because we can't, kind of do it in the abstract in isolation, but we also can't do it in, kind of like total crowded, noisy environments.
That makes perfect sense. I'm curious, because I know there's a couple of core concepts in the book. The broken work we talked about a little bit. I want to spend a few minutes there, and then I want to move into the couples counseling for humans and technology, because that's too fascinating for me not to ask you about.
I can start with broken work. So this was interesting because, again, I felt like what is helpful sometimes, and I'm sure, you see this in your work, right? That sometimes you need to name things to fix them. And so what we had was this general sense of work not being great, kind of like a Jimmy Carter malaise, right? It just doesn't feel good. So went through and identified actually 3 types, and you can pick and tie these, by the way, to like engagement survey questions. And that's the great thing, is you can really data, derive these aspects. And so there are 3 ways that modern work is sort of going off the rails. Number 1, it's work intensification. And this is something I actually just did a big follow-up 1,000-person study on. And work intensification is, basically either doing too many things per unit of time, right? So that might be having to pack too many boxes in a warehouse, or being on too many Zoom calls in a day, right? Every job's got its equivalent. It might be work being like, too sort of like emotionally fraught. And it might be work being too interdependent. When you heard Jamie Dimon, complain about why does something have to go through 17 committees, that's work that's too interdependent. Like, nobody can get anything done because everybody depends on everybody else in silly, useless ways. So work intensification is one, like with packing too much in. Performative work is another issue. And that's like work that's not work at all. It's just the performance of work. And I mean theatrical performance, not like athletic performance. It's like, look, I'm in the meeting, I'm sending all the emails. We've all had coworkers like this, right? Where they're just doing the appearance of work. And you get whole cultures where people feel they have to perform and they have to do the appearance of work, but it doesn't get anything done. It's unhelpful, right? And it obfuscates who's doing the real work. Like it gives you real performance management problems at the root. And then the final one is that work is often misunderstood. And that particularly happens at times like right now, where the skills that it takes to do work are changing fast. So you get this phenomenon where like your boss doesn't understand the work you do. Again, we've all been there at some point in our careers. And misunderstood work is dangerous because it's very hard to manage work you don't understand. And again, you can end up there in a very well-meaning place, right? As you get promoted, your roles become more dependent on your leadership skills and less dependent on your sort of technical doer skills. And that's a normal progression. But at moments where the technical doer skills are changing really fast, like right now, you can end up totally dislocated and really struggling to manage your team of doers. And they can end up really frustrated because their boss doesn't understand what they're doing. So those are sort of those 3 broken work vectors. And I think once you understand what they are, and what your organization's real issues are, do you have a lot of intensified work, but a pretty good non-performative culture? Is the issue just misunderstood work because your industry has changed so fast? Again, it puts you on a path to solving.
I love this. And it feels like the misunderstood work is going to kind of dovetail into the couples counseling because we haven't talked really at all about technology, but you just teased it, right? Technology is moving people into ways, particularly AI. That's what everybody's focused on right now. We're entering, if we're not there already, an era where for the first time in human history, knowledge is a commodity like air and water, whereas historically our status, either at our place of work or in society, was determined by how much we knew. And now, if you know the right prompts, you know as much as anybody, right? So let's dive into the couples counseling piece and how you came to that.
So this one was in some ways born out of personal experience, with a few friends at my old firm. We used to joke about we needed because consultants, you submit timesheets, you bill your time to this client, bill your time to that client, right? We used to joke that we needed a timesheet code for just dealing with broken technology because it took up that percentage of our day. You come in on Monday morning, this happened to me all the time. My computer wouldn't start for 2 hours, just crazy stuff. So it got me thinking, everything we do in technology and all the ways we think about it, technology works and is helpful. But technology doesn't always work. It's not always helpful. The technologies we are given to work with at work don't always work well together. There's some great, in the book I found some great studies about I think it was something like 50% of the time when a new system is implemented, people want the old system back. We spend millions, billions on technology. It's going to fuel the whole enterprise. And a lot of the time what it does is actually not help people and or drive them crazy. And again, we need a space in the dialogue for that and to solve for that and to look human outward and say, okay, I implemented these 5 technologies, but the way one human experiencing all 5, we're not getting the business value that investment was supposed to make because it doesn't work with the human being, right? That's what we need, the couples counseling.
How do we bridge the gap? So what is that couples counseling, I'm doing it in air quotes, what does that actually look like?
Well, again, you have to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff of work. So we've actually used ethnographic research in this regard, right? Of looking at, okay, when you're touching this technology system, how do you feel? Like, what technologies are you touching in a day? We have this belief, like, for instance, most organizations would probably be shocked at how much of their people's time is actually spent using just communications technologies like, email, Teams, chat, Slack, text, whatever, as opposed to all the other technologies that they think are helping them do their job. And there's a right balance there. But if we don't even know, we don't often look at things like, simple metrics. How many emails do people receive in a day? And is that a manageable number? Are people doing things like kludging systems and I'm going to download it back into Excel and put it back in? These are actual tells that the technology isn't working quite right for them and that we have to get that relationship right. And it's interesting because I actually spend a lot of time with CIOs, and this is something that I think CIOs are becoming very attuned to and very interested in. And it's time for, I think there's a great conversation to happen actually between IT and HR about the human experience of technology. And again, it all comes back to if your business goals mean leveraging, latest and greatest technology, you've got to figure out a way to make that happen that's felicitous for humans. Because if it doesn't work for humans, I think a lot of what's burning people out today is honestly sometimes the technological component of their work.
So I'm thinking about this in kind of the same vein that I thought about evaluating pace at work, right? Because I've never thought about, okay, so if an organization is going to evaluate how many emails are too many emails in a day, the analytical part of my brain is, okay, so how do we arrive at that number? How do we know how many emails are too much in comparison to everything else that they have to do? And then I would ask the question, even if I know that I'm getting too many emails or my employees are getting too many emails, I'm wondering how I do something about that because many of the emails are external, right? They're coming from clients or vendors. And so I know obviously whatever that sweet spot is for just enough versus way too many emails is going to vary organization to organization. Having been in the weeds, what are some of the conversations and that you've been part of in the observations that you've experienced that would start leading people, if somebody's listening, to saying, yeah, this is a really big thing I need to think about, but I don't really know how to think about it. What would you say to that person?
Some of it is just listening to the feedback that you're getting from your workers and treating it differently. That a lot of times there's kind of this leadership filter of like, when people complain about things or unhappy, like, oh, they're just whining again. They're needy. They want everything. Blah, blah. I've unfortunately worked with a lot of leaders who have that. They see the world through that lens. And so what you need to do is take a step back and say, people's feelings about this stuff are data. Just treat it as data. So if people say, I feel like I'm getting too many emails, just say, okay, that's a data point. And what that data might mean is, again, all that productivity you want from them that you're not getting, they might have just given you the data to explain why that's not happening. So it's like, take your own emotion out of it. And then, there are some good unlocks for this stuff that are simple and behavioral. So I'll give you a piece of advice that everyone hates, but is the right advice, which is that email is a network effects mechanism. And what that means is you want to receive fewer emails, send fewer emails. The relationship is quite direct. And that's actually something that, if you think about it, as an organization, you can train on that. You can coach on that, right? You can actually educate people as to how to send fewer emails, right? But it's part of a bigger conversation that I think we need to have in organizations. Like, think about it. Did anyone ever train you on how to send an effective email? Have you ever taken a training on that?
I haven't. I'm sure most people have. Yeah, nobody does.
That's actually a helpful thing. There's some kind of like what's old is new again, like super old school kinds of communications training. We should be doing it for modern tech. I would personally love to take a course on like how to be effective on mechanisms like Slack or Teams, right? How to do chat well. There's some, basic stuff. Like, we got all these great technologies and we don't really know how to use them. And so there are, kind of pathways that start from take the feedback seriously, treat it as data, and then go into the simple human behaviors. And this is actually like a real path to change, I believe.
So I love this, and it kind of leads me to where I want to end us on a very happy note. Your last chapter of the book, A Good Day at Work Every Day Towards a Realistic Human Future of Work. So this is a fun, aspirational vision that your book is laying out a path to get to. Talk us through that. Talk about how we get there, because I think that's ultimately where we want to be, where the tools and technology are there to assist us rather than essentially ruining our lives.
Making us nuts, yeah. So I often compare the time we're in right now to sort of the early industrial revolution. So when you read about factories in the early industrial revolution, they were terrible places to work. There was sawdust on the floor and they would catch on fire spontaneously. And machines were like lopping people's arms. You know what I mean? It was physically dangerous. It was awful. And so what happened was we collectively, and it was really a public-private partnership, government was involved, labor was involved, businesses were involved. Everybody kind of got together and reframed what a good, safe workplace looked like. And what happened was, we cleaned up the factories and we implemented health and safety. And then guess what? In the middle of the 20th century, we get this beautiful burst of productivity because we got our act together. And for me, that's the journey that we have to go on. Or what are the guardrails and the sort of the safety measures that we need to implement on these sorts of, this kind of new technologically inflected workplace to say, okay, this is actually the efficient frontier of a healthy way of working that's both good for human workers, but, also makes everybody more money, is more productive. I think we can do that. We've gone on the journey before, and I think we can do it again.
I love that. Hopeful, the Industrial Revolution and boom in the mid 20th century was a perfect analogy for what we're faced with today with rapidly evolving technologies. So thank you for sharing that. Melissa, I have thoroughly loved our conversation today. As you know, I wrap up every episode with just this one question, and that is, what is your biggest helping, that one most important takeaway you'd like somebody to walk away with after hearing our conversation today?
So, people always go around saying like the work is the work. I think the most helpful thing you can say is to challenge that not all work is good work. Once you take a step back and say, it is okay to look at all the activities I do and say that there are some right ones and some wrong ones. That mindset shift changes everything. So that's what I would peg as sort of my biggest helping.
Awesome. I love that. The book is Work Here Now and is available wherever books are sold. But for those listening to this, digging what you're saying, wanting to find out more about you, Melissa, where can people learn more about you online?
So they can connect to me on LinkedIn. They can check out the company's website, anthromeinsight.com. And we also have a LinkedIn page for Anthrome Insight on LinkedIn. So those are some great places to come find us.
And perfect. And for those of you who got your earbuds in, you're in the gym, we got you covered. Everything Melissa Swift will be linked in the show notes at drrichschuster.com. Well, Melissa, I loved our conversation again. Thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And can't wait to have you back when that new book comes out. For those of you who listened to this and took time out of your day, thank you as well. If you like what you heard, if you're inspired, if you're going to go make some changes in your workplace, maybe send some fewer emails today, go give us a follow and a 5-star review on the podcast app of your choice, because this is what helps other people find the show. But most importantly, go out there today and do something nice for somebody else, even if you don't know who they are, and post in your social media feeds using the hashtag #MyDailyHelping, because the happiest people are those that help others.